On today's movie review mashup, Sony's Uncharted tries to prove that Tom Holland can be in an action-adventure movie without wearing a mask. Is Leatherface the only thing that is old in Netflix's Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot? And does Netflix Fistful of Vengeance invigorate you with the Chief of Wu Assassin? Stay tuned to find out which movie will be this week's must-watch. What is up, guys? Welcome to the very first movie review mashup, where I review the latest movies from the week and let you know which one's a must-watch. I'm Justin McGill, and let's get to the reviews. So first up is Uncharted. So while this movie is based off of a video game, if you didn't know that, I would say that it does a decent job laying out the premise, which is fairly simple and easy to follow. But in saying that, I don't know if that helps or hurts the movie. For fans of this video game, I feel like they're going to watch this and they're going to maybe think there's not enough Easter eggs or stuff that you'd recognize from the game and expect, versus it just being and feeling like a regular adventure movie. Now, in saying that also, let's move over to Tom Holland, who, after watching this movie, I was torn on whether Tom Holland was actually a good Nathan Drake. Now, he definitely does not look and feel like the Nathan Drake from the video game, and I feel like some fans may hold that against him, as somewhat I did as well. I mean, I could not get past some of his boyish looks, even though he had a lot of shirtless scenes, and they were trying to show off his endurance. It still did not change the fact that he is not the Nathan Drake that many were expecting. And I feel like even from the fan movie and fan art where they have Nathan Fillion in there, I just think that he just was miscast for this role. I'm sorry to say that. Now, I will say on the flip side, playing devil's advocate, that I think that Tom Holland did a pretty decent job with his personality, to where I was like, okay, he may not be the Nathan Drake that we have known and loved, but he's a Nathan Drake that I can get on board with, and that I would love to actually see reprise the role again as. Moving on, let's talk about Sully and the villains, because I'm a Mark Wahlberg fan, and this performance to me did not make me think of Sully at all, okay? If you're familiar with the video games, you kind of know what Sully is like. He's more, in my mind, like a J.K. Simmons type character. And this just seemed like Mark Wahlberg playing Mark Wahlberg, which for me is okay, but for many fans are like, this didn't work. I did enjoy his chemistry with Tom Holland, and, even though Sam is missing, which is, Tom Holland, Nathan Drake's real brother, I feel like Sully could be, fill that brotherly or even fatherly role to Nathan Drake in this movie. So they had really good chemistry, but again, I feel like his role was also miscast. Now, moving on to Antonio Banderas and Tati Gabrielle, the actual villains of the movie, along with their henchmen, they were decent villains, but I just couldn't stop thinking of Banderas and Spy Kids for this type of movie, and it just made him feel less threatening in my mind. You may disagree, but it goes the same for Tati, because I am more familiar with her in Netflix's Sabrina, which in that show she's more of like a side villain, and it just kind of echoes the same in this movie. Even though she tries to be a threatening, menacing villain in this movie, I just can't help feel like she's just not what the movie needed to be, like a true villain. I feel like if they had stuck with Banderas and maybe made him closer to the source material that we've kind of expected from the video games, he might have been more menacing. So Uncharted to me feels very familiar when compared to other treasure hunting adventure movies that we've come to, from like The Mummy, The Goonies, National Treasure, Jungle Cruise, Indiana Jones, and even fellow video game movie Tomb Raider. But I just don't know that this movie did enough to set itself apart from the pack and make itself memorable. I obviously named all those other movies off the top of my head, and I just think that those rank a lot higher than Uncharted, by far, and I think they'll do the same in your mind as well. So in saying all that, while Uncharted had the potential to take its place among many other great adventure movies that have come before it, many will not be able to get past the story, as it feels all too familiar, and it doesn't do enough to make it stand out. And the fact that the movie's main heroes are simply miscast for the roles many fans of the Uncharted franchise are expecting to see, just is not going to do it for most moviegoers. So I gave this one 3.5 out of 5, because, well, I think it's supposed to be a movie based off the video game Uncharted. I feel like it's more loosely based, and this is more of a just straight adventure movie using the names of those characters, but like as a reimagining. And if you've watched multiple videos on my channel, you know how I feel about reimagining. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And in this case, I think it can be tweaked. Now, the movie does set up for a possible sequel, and I do think that it could and deserves a sequel, but I think they have a lot of changes to make and to do before they can win over fans. Switching gears, let's talk about Netflix's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So first up, let's talk about the stinking gentry. So the premise of this movie is actually pretty interesting. It's very different from what we've gotten in past with the main house, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the family. And this is more of a younger generation of people coming into a town to try to reinvigorate and, more gentrification. And it sets the stage for a very good, in other movies, it seems like these kids kind of stumble upon this house. But in this case, I feel like they brought this change so aggressively to Leatherface that in some ways you're sympathetic to him and some, and what happens to him. And so it's more cause and effect. And you're like, well, you did this, so you're going to get this back. So you almost don't feel anything for the victims. You're like, no, I want to, give me the chainsaw. I'll do it myself. And so there are a couple times I've been watching this movie where I feel like, oh, poor Leatherface. I'm like, yeah, get him, Leatherface. But in the same sense, well, we're trying to be, with the heroes and not have everybody get killed. But in some cases, I'm like, I'm with the Hicks and Hillbillies of Texas as a Texan, and I say, stinking gentries, let's get them. This movie definitely has the gore and some disturbing scenes that you would expect from a horror movie. And I mean, especially from a guy that's carrying a butcher knife, a meat cleaver, and a chainsaw. But he also has a lot of opportunities to scare and kill his victims. I mean, the first kills of the movie were very much like we come to expect from past Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, where it's, has the great scenery and the chilling kind of unexpectedness of when and where he's going to come out and get you. But I think most people are going to remember this movie for the kills that are done on the bus, which we've seen in trailers, because while it's really kind of silly and over the top, it is something new and interesting in the franchise that has not been done before. Don't get me wrong, they deserved it. When you watch it, you're going to be like, they all deserved it. But you're going to look at it and go, that's what I'm going to walk away remembering from this movie. Whether it be good or bad, that's going to be like the standout scene for this movie. So many fans will be excited to see that Marilyn Burns does return as Sally. And while I know that some people think, well, this is straight up like a copycat because, we've had Neve Campbell return for Scream, we had Jamie Lee Curtis return for the Halloween movies. So they're just doing the same thing that these other ones are doing and try to throw nostalgia in there and have, Sally Hardesty return in the franchise that she started from the very 1974, so almost 50 years later. But, I will say that it does some things a little bit differently, and because of that, it makes her kind of more stand out compared to other heroines that she's in the same group with, and that's all I'll say about that. I will say this movie does a good job, establishing new blood to the franchise, and compared to like the recent Screams New Blood, I actually like these characters a whole lot better, and I would actually look forward to seeing these kids return in future movies versus some of the kids from Scream. I love Scream, but if we're gonna get a Scream 6, some of those kids need to die off within like the first 5 minutes. Just gonna say it. There are several scenes from the movies that have good callbacks to the various movies in the franchise. The opening scenes are the ones that we're already kind of used to, as far as like this kind of news report documentary thing going on. The kitchen door of the orphanage is very reminiscent of the sliding metal door that we've seen many times, where Leatherface just kind of appears and terrorizes his victims. And then there's a clothesline and silhouette of a house where Sally Hardesty is living in the movie, that very much reminds you of the OG Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, with just the ambiance of what's going on. And those callbacks, I appreciate it, and I hope you'll appreciate too if you're fans of the franchise or even a horror fan in general. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. If I had to dock the movie points, I would say that the movie tries to get creative with how viewers are introduced to Leatherface. I miss the old house and the crazy family members. I think while this new premise works, I think that if they just stuck with what fans are kind of expecting, it would have given more opportunities for maybe better scares. Don't get me wrong, there are entertaining and disturbing scenes in this movie, but I just don't feel like they are as good as some of like I love the 2003 version, the reboot, but even some of the older 1974 ones, I think those were just a little bit better. Also, with Sally's return to the franchise with almost 15 years later, it just did leave me feeling as fulfilled as I would have liked compared to other heroines returning to their franchise. If Heather Langenkamp gets returned to Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, I hope they do her a little better than they did Sally. So, in saying that, Netflix's Chainsaw Massacre brings Leatherface and his chainsaw buzzing into 2022. The premise, characters, and gore and nice callbacks make this franchise feel ready for more scares, and leaving Leatherface's gray hair the only thing feeling old. And with that, I give it 4 out of 5 chainsaws. And finally, let's talk about Netflix's Fistful of Vengeance. So I have not watched Wu Assassins. I wanted to see it more for Louis Tan, to see him in action, since he's in Mortal Kombat. The Mortal Kombat movie is Cole Young, and Louis Tan fans think that he should bring his Wu Assassin martial arts skills to the Mortal Kombat sequel. So I want to give this one a watch. I did watch a season 1 recap to kind of get me acquainted before I watched this movie, but the movie gives a quick recap right off the bat of the first season and then kind of gets you right into the movie, pretty much leaving right where the series left off. This movie definitely delivers when it comes to action and fight scenes, and I can definitely see why fans of the series are excited about this movie. The choreography, the weapons, the blood, the magic, it all works and it's exhilarating and it's really fun to watch. Now, in saying that, this movie did remind me a lot of Extraction, the Chris Hemsworth Netflix movie, and also of John Wick. I'm sure you're going to watch that and get the same idea. It's just because of the destinations and the fight scenes, and for the most part, if you enjoy this movie for the fight scenes alone, then this movie's going to be right up your alley. Also, it's supposed to be a follow-up, I think, and a continuation of Wu Assassin Season 1, but it kind of reminded me of more like a one-off story that just has tie-ins and callbacks to the main series. What comes to mind more is like the Dragon Ball Z movies that were kind of in between the various Dragon Ball Z series. That's kind of what this reminded me of, because I feel like if you never told a story and just did Season 2, you wouldn't have to watch this to get Season 2, if that makes sense. So I feel like this is just going to be like a good movie that if this does really well and they do a Season 2, it's like a side adventure to get you, back on track. So if that's the kind of thing they're going for, that's great. That's what I picked up on, but that's what it reminded me of. So as I said, while this movie definitely brings the action, special effects, and beautiful scenery of a blockbuster film, the story, dialogue, and acting, and even the choreography at times feel like it's straight out of a TV or B movie. And for me, that took me out of the movie several times. It's like beautiful scenes, amazing action, and then in one exchange of dialogue, and I'm quick to realize, oh, this is not a blockbuster movie because they would have better writing and wouldn't be acting like that. So those are things you're going to notice when you watch this movie. I will say that after watching the movie, I feel like this does an excellent job of elevating Wu Assassins forward. I think a Season 2 of the show should definitely be greenlit if it hasn't already from Netflix. The movie alone proves that there are a lot more stories to be told with these characters, and if Supernatural can go for 15 seasons, then Wu Assassins can at least get a Season 2. So for my final thoughts and rating, if you watch Fistful of Vengeance thinking it'll be a high-action blockbuster movie, then you might be disappointed with the movie's actual TV and B-movie feel. But if you watch as a fan of Wu Assassins, then you'll be pleasantly rewarded and yearning for more. So with that, I give it a 3.5 out of 5 Lewis Tans. So this week's movies were definitely a mixed bag and offer viewers a somewhat variety to choose from. My must-watch recommendation is going to be Netflix's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you want something less gory, I'd give Uncharted a watch. Just don't expect to walk away feeling like you found gold. And if you want to kill some time, I'd give Fistful of Vengeance a watch. So that's it for my very first movie review mashup. Let me know in the comments what you think about my reviews, my ratings, and my choices for the must-watch. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you want more, like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time on the mashup.